She came to document their myths, but the myths were waking up, and they were hungry for new faces. Dr. Eris Thorne, a historian whose name was synonymous with debunking folklore, arrived in the secluded village of Oakhaven with a satchel full of skepticism and a professional smile. The village was nestled in a deep, shadowed valley, cut off from the modern world by a winding, treacherous road and a thick canopy of ancient trees that seemed to suck the very light from the sky. Her task, commissioned by a distant historical society, was to document the unique and persistent legends of Oakhaven before they faded completely. The elders spoke of a curse, a pact made with the old ones of the wood centuries ago. A pact, they whispered, that was now broken. Eris found their stories fascinating, but purely from an academic standpoint. She spent her first week in the village's small, dusty archive, a room attached to the modest stone church. She interviewed the village elder, a man named Thomas, whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles and worry. He told her of the Gloomwood beasts, creatures said to stalk the forests. There forms a nightmarish blend of man and animal. He spoke of the weeping willow white, a spirit that lured people to the river with promises of lost love, only to drag them beneath the murky water. Eris nodded, recorded his every word, and privately categorized them as cautionary tales, metaphors for the dangers of the woods and the grief of losing loved ones. She was a woman of science and reason. Curses were the language of fear, not fact. Her days were spent mapping the lineage of these myths, tracing them back to crop failures and harsh winters. Her evenings were spent at the Gnarled Root, the village's only tavern, run by a kind, boisterous woman named Alara. Alara would laugh at the grim tales, topping off Eris's ale and telling her not to mind old Thomas. He's just trying to spook the city girl, she'd say, her eyes twinkling. Alara had a young son, Finn, a boy of about 10 with a wild imagination who would follow Eris around, asking questions about the world beyond the valley. He'd show her his drawings, fantastical creatures with too many limbs and eyes that glowed in the dark. Eris found his creativity charming, a testament to the powerful influence of local lore on a young mind. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came a week into her stay. A farmer named Silas, a quiet man Eris had interviewed just 2 days prior, failed to bring his goods to the morning market. A search party was formed. Eris, feeling a sense of civic duty, joined them. They found him in his field, near the edge of the woods, but it wasn't Silas anymore. His body was grotesquely elongated. His skin had taken on the texture of rough bark, and his fingers had fused and sharpened into what looked like gnarled branches. His mouth was frozen in a silent scream, stretched wide, as if he'd been trying to call for help as the transformation took him. The villagers recoiled in terror, whispering prayers. Eris felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach, but her mind scrambled for a rational explanation. A rare genetic disorder? A chemical agent in the soil? It had to be something logical, but logic began to fray. The next day, another villager, a weaver known for her beautiful tapestries, was found in her cottage. Her arms had thinned and multiplied, covered in a fine, silky hair, resembling the legs of a monstrous spider. She was tangled in her own loom, her body a macabre part of the very art she created. Panic, thick and suffocating, descended upon Oakhaven. The villagers locked their doors, their eyes filled with a terror Eris had only ever read about in her books. Elder Thomas's warnings now echoed in her mind, not as folklore, but as prophecy. "The pact is broken," he'd rasped, his voice trembling. "They are reclaiming what was promised. They are remaking us in their image." He explained that the villagers' ancestors had promised the forest spirits a tithe, a life from each generation, to be spared their wrath. But the last tithe had been refused a century ago. The spirits, he believed, were now collecting their debt with interest. Eris resisted. She argued with Thomas, with the few villagers brave enough to speak to her. This was mass hysteria, she insisted. A shared psychosis triggered by isolation and fear. There was a scientific answer, and she was going to find it. But her conviction was a flickering candle in a hurricane of horror. Her world shattered completely when Alara came to her, desperate. Her son, Finn, was sick. He had a raging fever and was muttering about the forest calling his name. Eris rushed to the tavern. She found the boy in his bed, his skin pale and clammy. As she tried to cool his forehead with a damp cloth, she saw it. A faint, dark line, like a crack, was appearing down the center of his back. He cried out, not in pain, but in confusion. "They're drawing me," he whispered, his eyes wide with a feverish, terrified wonder. "The pictures, they're drawing me." Eris stayed by his side, her scientific detachment completely gone, replaced by a raw, human plea for this to stop. But it didn't. Over the next hour, she watched in absolute, soul-crushing horror as the boy's body began to contort. His spine lengthened, his limbs twisted, his skin grew coarse and patchy, like the hide of some woodland beast. His innocent, boyish face stretched and pulled into a feral muzzle, his teeth sharpening into fangs. The imaginative little boy who drew monsters was becoming one of his own creations. When Alara saw him, a scream tore from her throat that held all the grief in the world. The thing that was once her son snarled, its eyes glowing with a malevolent green light, and scrambled out the window, disappearing into the encroaching woods. Eris was frozen, the image of Finn's transformation seared into her mind. This was not psychosis. This was real. The village descended into chaos. The transformations became more frequent, more monstrous. The Gloomwood beasts were no longer just stories. They were neighbors. The weeping willow white was not a myth. It was the baker's wife, her form now ethereal and dripping with river water, her sobs echoing through the night. The bond Eris had formed with Alara turned to ash. The tavern owner, hollowed by grief, now looked at Eris with accusation in her eyes. "You brought this," she hissed one day, her voice ragged. "You, with your books and your questions. You woke them up." Eris tried to reason with her, but it was no use. That evening, Eris watched from her window as Alara walked towards the river, a trance-like calm on her face. Later that night, a new, mournful wail joined the chorus of the damned. Eris was alone, a prisoner in a village of living nightmares. The myths had consumed their makers. Her research notes, once a source of pride, now felt like a curse book she had helped write. She pored over the ancient texts in the church archive, no longer seeking to debunk, but to survive. She found a passage, barely legible, describing the curse not as a pact, but as a contagion. It said the curse lay dormant in the village's bloodline, awakened by a catalyst of disbelief, an outsider who questioned the old ways too loudly. Her own rationalism, her scientific certainty, had been the key that unlocked the cage. She was the reason. The weight of that knowledge was crushing. As a storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest in her soul, a sudden, searing pain shot up her own spine. It felt like a hot poker, sharp and unforgiving. She stumbled, catching herself on a table, her breath catching in her throat. The pain was deep, elemental. It felt like her very bones were being reshaped. With trembling hands, she lit a lantern and staggered outside into the rain. She knelt beside a large puddle, the water rippling from the downpour. She needed to see. She had to know. As she stared into the murky, distorted reflection, the face looking back at her began to twist. Her eyes widened, the pupils elongating into slits. Her jaw clicked, stretching unnaturally. The myths of Oakhaven were not just waking up. They had found a new face to wear. Hers. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the darkness, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves a good scare, and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. We'll see you in the next one.